Second explanation of forgetting is retrieval failure due to the absence of cues. So yeah, when we talk about forgetting, usually we're not saying it's gone forever. It's just we can't remember it at that moment in time. And you've probably all experienced it before, where you're trying to remember something and ping, suddenly something makes it ping back into your head, or just randomly something comes along and that makes you suddenly think of something, be it a song or a smell or something like that. Okay, and those are cues. Those are cues that can help us to remember things. So this proposal is saying the absence of those cues can lead to us not remembering things, i.e. Forgetting. Some are meaningful. So when this is originally coded, originally learnt, they might be there specifically to aid recall, so mnemonics, things that you help, naughty elephant, squirt water, that kind of thing, are all meaningful. But when you learn things, encode new memories, you're going to have all the other things as well. So, yeah, when I say all the other things, we've got everything else that's around externally at the time of original coding, but then you've also got the internal factors as well. So how you're feeling, your internal state. Now, Tolving proposed the encoding specificity principle, ESP, and that for the best recall, the cues that were there at the time of coding, so when you originally stored the information, they need to be there at the time of recall as well. If the cues are different, be that different environmental or different internal, then there'll be some forgetting. Okay, so that's ultimately the key proposal. Try and talk about the encoding specificity principle. Ultimately, I suppose you're saying we recall things best under the same conditions as we learn them because it provides the cues. So as I've said, meaningful, not meaningful. The not directly, these are not directly linked to the information. So yes, the context in which it happens, so the location that you're in, if that's different, then that might have a negative impact on your chances of remembering, and also your state as well. So if you're feeling moody when you learn something, you're better to be moody when you're trying to recall it, or tired or drunk. The proposal is that your best chance of remembering the information is in the same state, because that will provide the cues. If the state is different, then we've got the absence of cues, which is what we're talking about. So yeah, evidence for this, as always with these proposals. Have we got any evidence to back this up? And we do. We've got the diving study where people learnt words underwater or on dry land, and then they either recalled it in the same conditions. So if they learnt it underwater, they recalled it underwater, learnt it on dry land, recalled it on dry land, or it was mixed up. So learnt it underwater, recalled it on dry land, learnt it on dry land, recalled it underwater. It's easier to write down and say. And basically, recall was best when conditions matched. So the best recall was when they were either underwater and recalled it underwater, or on dry land and recalled it on dry land. So that supports the proposal, the encoding specificity principle, that the cues, the external cues on this occasion, prompted the recall, and where it didn't match, those cues were absent. Okay, hence the forgetting due to the absence of cues. So that's a really nice study to remember. It's a very memorable one, easy to explain, easy to link to this proposal. Very similar, but this study looked at state, and rather than being underwater, it was tablets that have antihistamines, I think, that have a sedative effect, make you sleepy, and it's basically the same thing. If people learnt the words under the effects of these drugs, then they recalled it under the same influence. If it was learnt not sleepy and recalled sleepy, or learnt not sleepy and recalled sleepy, then recall wasn't good. So again, these are internal cues that could prompt recall when things matched. When they were not there, when the internal state was different, then more forgetting occurred because of the absence of those cues. So you've got two different studies there supporting two different aspects of this. Other things you could talk about, well, yes, you can get these effects, but actually we have to ask the question, is this such a big deal in everyday life? So you could say, okay, all school lessons need to take place in a silent exam hall because that's where you're going to be recording the information, but actually the difference between being in a classroom and being in an exam hall isn't so great. So for a lot of the things that we come across in everyday life, it's not going to be a drastic difference, particularly not like being underwater or on dry land. So we can raise that query that maybe these effects are easy to show, and I think they are very easy to show, to demonstrate in an experiment, but in everyday life they might not actually have that big an impact. But they do also have important practical applications. Now, the last topic in memory is the cognitive interview. So I won't say too much about that now, but once we've done that, you'll be able to talk about how it's based on research, including this idea. And basically, it's a police interview technique that goes out of its way to provide additional cues to help people to remember, because the argument is in a standard interview, those cues aren't there. So don't worry too much about that now. We will be covering that further down the line. Okay.